So I have to admit, I am really excited about getting into this morning. So if you will turn over in your Bibles to Daniel chapter 3. And Norman, you can go to the first slide, the title, yep, right there. I will not, while you're turning, I will not ask you how many of you watch the game show channel. I didn't know such a thing ever existed until I went to my parents' house. And sometimes when I go down to my parents' house, my mom will have on the game show channel, and it's all day long game shows. Okay, I remember as a kid, I used to love watching Jeopardy, and I used to love Wheel of Fortune and those. Well, this channel is nonstop game shows all day long. And one time I was over there and I saw one that I had never seen before where they put up emojis, little pictures, and you have to figure out, what is the message saying? And so the full title of today's sermon could be represented by three symbols. Does anyone want to tell me what do those three symbols represent? It's a very common saying. Just shout it out. Yep, egg something fire. What is it?
Out of the frying pan and into the fire.
Out of the frying pan into the fire. That is the today's sermon title. Out of the frying pan and into the fire. But before we do that, a quiz. I promise you. See, Michael, I don't just do it in class, in church too, as well. Michael over here was one of my students this year for History and Bible. He's been through all my torment and torture, and he's probably smiling like you get to observe. Now you get to go through it. Alrighty, you may use the back of your prayer sheet if you would like, or you may just answer in your head. We'll hold you to your honesty on these. Alrighty, question number 1, as we look back at what we've looked at. We said that Judah was taken captive. Were they taken captive by A, Assyria, B, Babylon, C, Persia, or D, aliens? If you watch the History Channel, I know you're all going to put down D. Hopefully you don't. Alrighty. Should I put you on the spot, Michael? You know the answer to this? That is correct. Good job. I give you extra credit if you were still in my class. Alrighty. I hope you guys all went letter B. I'm not going to ask how many got that right at this. Yes, I am. How many of you got that right so far? Alrighty. Good. Alrighty. We're off to a good start. It only gets harder from there. Number 2. The king of Babylon was A, Ashurbanipal, B, Jehoiakim, C, Cyrus, or D, Nebuchadnezzar. Give you a moment to think through those great ancient names. I will give you a hint. Every one of them was a king. But the correct answer would be, everybody? D, Nebuchadnezzar. Alrighty, good job, class. You guys are doing great this morning. Number 3. Daniel refused to do what? To obey the king, to study Babylonian culture, eat food given by the king, or interpret the king's dream. Which one of those four things, actually again, that math thing gets me every time. So those 4 things did Nebuchadnezzar. C is correct. Eat food given by the king. Good. I want to ask, how many? Actually, I am going to ask. I just can't help it. How many of you got 100% so far? We're doing good. I'll tell you what, I'll roll you guys in my class next year. You can come on down. Number 4. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were A, Babylonian gods, B, Daniel's fellow Jewish captives, C, Babylonian words for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, D, names of Babylonian cities. Good. My mind's thinking C because I'm hungry, but you are correct. The answer is B. They would be Daniel's fellow captives. Alrighty, next question, Norman. Number 5. Alrighty, let's get to a little tougher ones. The head of gold, we mentioned last week that there was an image, a statue made of various and different metals. We said the head was made of gold. Did it represent A, Persia, B, Assyria, C, Babylon, D, modern nations, E, Greece, or F, Rome? Michael, I'm going to put you on the spot again. The head of gold represented, which is? That is correct. C, Babylon. Good job, man. I'll give you double extra credit. It warms my heart. Alrighty, number 6. The chest of silver, we said. So we saw the head of gold was Babylon. We said that the chest and arms were made of silver. Did they represent? Well, same choices: Persia, Assyria, Babylon, the modern nations, Greece, or Rome. I'll take a raise of hands this time. Who's confident that they know this answer? All righty, Mr. Dennis. It was Persia is correct. A, Persia. How many of you got that one right? All right, a couple of you. A couple of you are like, oh, man, I missed that one. All righty, number 7. The abdomen and thighs of this statue, we said, were made of bronze. They represented one of these 6 names. You can mark 2 of those off of your list. If you're a smart test taker, you know, can't be Babylon or Persia. We've already covered those. What did those thighs of bronze represent? Alrighty, I will take a raise of hands. Who's confident? Alrighty, wow, another student in the back. Alrighty, student in the back, and you are in my class next year, so this is negative credit if you get it wrong. Go ahead.
E, Greece.
It is correct. E is Greece. Good job, saving your grade before we even get there. Alright, how many of you got E, Greece, correct? Raise your hand. Oh, a couple of you. I'm starting to lose some of you. Alrighty. Yes, this is this kind of stuff I love. It makes my teacher heart smile. 8. The legs of iron represented what? Well, we're now down to just a couple options now. Which one of those options haven't we said? Is it Assyria, the modern nations, Rome? Who would think about iron? Something tough and strong as iron. Which one of those names would really be, when you think about tough as iron, it would be? That is correct. It would be F, Rome. Good. Alrighty. We're on the rebound now. 2 more. Number 9. Last week we talked about the feet of clay mixed with iron represented what? You're down to 2 possibilities. Was it Assyria, that great ancient empire? Or was it the modern nations of the world? And you think about clay and iron, and it really doesn't mix real well, and it doesn't fuse completely together. And as you put all of that together in your mind, you would say the correct answer is, everybody? D, modern nations. Very good. And you'll notice that Assyria was a choice that was not used. And again, keep in mind that the book of Daniel was written after the Assyrian Empire, and this is prophecy looking forward. So Assyria does not get included on that image, though it was a great empire. Alrighty, last question. And then this is the mean teacher move. Now I take out the multiple choice. So number 10, that is mean. I'm not that mean in class, am I? Am I that mean in class? Yeah. He's saying this because he wants to say, no, you're a lot meaner than that. Alrighty. Number 10, the rock that destroyed the statue. We said there was a rock that was cut out of the mountain, not formed by hands, and it hit the statue and disintegrated it. What did that statue represent? Can anybody tell me? All right, now you're going to make me cry. Don't make a teacher cry. What did that rock represent? Alrighty, student in the back is going to go for it again. Alrighty, and again, I'll tell you what, for an A or an F, here we go.
Jesus' coming kingdom.
Yes, this would be Jesus' coming kingdom. We talked about all of these kingdoms that would come. We start with Babylon, and again, they were in chronological order. They would be conquered by Persia, would be conquered by Greece, would be conquered by Rome, and then eventually, time kind of skips, and we see the formation of the modern nations, and we said that we believe one day these nations will come together in an alliance, but ultimately, all of that will be destroyed by the coming kingdom of Christ, and I am so glad. And when Christ's kingdom comes, he will overthrow the kingdoms of this world and establish his kingdom. And I cannot wait to live in that. Alrighty, well, I will not ask for your final grades. You're on your best behavior. If you failed that quiz, you can see Mr. Bill. He'll sign you up for cleanup duty in the church. He's got plenty of slots. Not that we're strong-arming anybody. As a reminder, we really could use some more help. If you would love to come, the sign-up sheet is in the back. But I need to speed on to Daniel chapter 3. And we got past the statue. And it's interesting because Daniel chapter 3, we open up and we find, well, we would find, if I would find Daniel chapter 3, there we go. We find that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, comes into the story again. And it says, Nebuchadnezzar, the king, made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits and its width 6 cubits. He set it up in the plains of Dora in the province of Babylon. So whether he was inspired by this dream, maybe he kind of missed the message of the dream, like maybe he kind of like, sometimes we like hear what we want to hear, or we focus on the parts that we want to focus on, and rather than maybe he missed the whole point of, yeah, you got this great kingdom, but there's a king who is greater, who is coming. And he kind of focused on the head of gold, and he really kind of got into his head about, man, I'm really pretty great. And so he thinks he's so great that he sets up a image or a statue. Now, if we look at the dimensions, and depending on what translation you're reading, I'm reading out of the New King James, so it gives you the old cubits, 60 by 9 cubits that I believe I just read. I'm getting old in my old age. Yes, I did, 6 and 9. So this would be a 90-foot statue by 9 feet wide. Okay, now, that would be a pretty skinny person, okay? If you can think about, 9 feet, like 9 stories tall, but only like 10 feet wide. So a lot of scholars are going, well, wait a second, Mo, that would be like, that statue, dude, that dude would look spindly at those proportions. So there's a couple possibilities. Number one, the word's not really clear. It could have been like an obelisk set up with his image carved into it. Also, this measurement can also account for the base of the thing. So there may have been this huge base with stairs built up, and then the image was on top of that. But no matter which way you look at it, we know that Nebuchadnezzar builds this monument to himself, okay? And he has some interesting commands to go along with it. It says, and King Nebuchadnezzar sent word to gather together the satraps and administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the province to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So the satraps and administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces gathered together for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then a herald cried aloud, "To you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at the time you hear the sound of the horns, the flute, the harp, the lyre, the psaltery, and symphony with all kinds of music, you shall fall down and worship the gold image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace." So the statue is set up. They gather all the important officials from the realm, and they bring them here to Babylon. Now, again, among those officials would be Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, Daniel's not mentioned here, and we're not sure why. Possibly he was away on official business, okay? Sometimes that did happen. Officials would travel from one place to another. But we will find out that at least 3, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, are present in this company. And the command from the king is clear. He says, look, you are going to, when the music starts, and it gives a list of all of these musical instruments. For those of you who love to study music, it's interesting because a lot of these instruments are Greek terms that were imported in. And so these could be very foreign instruments. And a lot of them we're still trying to figure out what they are. But what we do know is that when those instruments sounded, Nebuchadnezzar was like, bow down and worship my statue. And like any mean teacher, not only does he give a command, he gives a consequence, okay? This is not optional. This is not if you feel like bowing down. This is you will bow down or else you will be thrown into a fiery furnace. Now, there probably were furnaces in this area not specifically designed to burn people alive. But again, you think about this statue was covered in gold. Okay, so there would have been furnaces in the area and probably used for the construction work. And Nebuchadnezzar just kind of looks over and goes, hey, yeah, you know what? You either bow down or we'll fire one of those things back up and we'll throw you in it. And that's the options that they are given. Alrighty, well, we are told then, so at that time, in verse 7, when all the people heard the sound of the horn, the flute, the harp, and the lyre, and symphony with all kinds of music, all the people, the nations, and the languages fell down and worshipped the gold image which Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So if you can imagine the scene, just this huge throngs of people around this statue, the music starts, and all of them listening to Nebuchadnezzar bow down to this gold image. Except, as we pick up in verse 8, therefore at that time, certain Chaldeans, who the Chaldeans were the Babylonians of this time period. These are the ones who would have been related to the same ethnic group that the king was. Certain Chaldeans came forward and accused the Jews. They spoke and said to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, the flute, the harp, the lyre, and the psaltery, in symphony with all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the gold image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the provinces of Babylon, namely Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not paid due regard to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the gold image which you have set up. Don't you hate those people? I hope you don't have these kind of people at your workplace, the ones who are just ready to run to the boss and, kind of curry favor. Well, that's what we see here. And there probably was a jealousy, because again, these are Chaldeans. These are men who are the same nationality as Nebuchadnezzar. And you sense in there's a hatred that we talked about. Daniel and his friends, because of the stand that they made, they were elevated, okay? These were some of Nebuchadnezzar's top counselors. And these men find a reason to bring accusation against them. Okay, we're going to see this theme come a little bit later in Daniel's own life. But right now, that's against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And they come and go, look, king, you're so wonderful, so great, love the statue, love bowing down to it. Hey, you know what? We noticed, though, those Jews, those ones that, you've put in the positions of power, they didn't bow down to the statue. Well, we come up into verse 13, it says, then Nebuchadnezzar in rage and fury. Okay, Nebuchadnezzar is not a king that you want to get on his bad side. Okay, he is angry. Like, hey, he said bow down, and these guys defied his orders. So we come, he says, he gave command to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So they brought these men before the king. And can you imagine? This guy is raging mad. Okay, and here's these three, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. This is probably still early in their life. We're talking about young men, probably in their early 20s at this point. Okay, we're not talking about men who've had a lot of life experience. Okay, these are young men. They are brought and dragged before the king. And Nebuchadnezzar goes on to say, Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the gold image which I have set up? Now, if you are ready, at the time you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the harp, the lyre, and the psaltery, and symphony with all kinds of music, you shall fall down and worship the image which I have made. Good. But if you do not worship, you shall be cast immediately into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Okay? And who is the God who will deliver you from my hand? So these three young men are brought, and they're given the ultimatum. Okay? Nebuchadnezzar really doesn't want to be defied. And he looks at these three and says, look, is it true? You haven't bowed down? Well, let me tell you now what you're going to do. We're going to fire this thing up again. Okay? That music's going to play, and you're going to bow down to the statue that I set up. And if you do, good. Well, we'll move on from here. But he's very clear. If you don't, I'm firing the furnace up, and you're going in. And it's interesting the thing that he tells them. He says, because he can see he's reading their minds, because he's thinking, they're like, well, they think their God's going to deliver them. And just like Pharaoh told Moses thousands of years before, he looks at them and says, and who is this God that you think can deliver you? Now again, a lot of us know how this story ends. But think about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego at this moment. Okay, they're facing possibly being burned alive. I mean, that's a horrible way to die. Okay? And they're facing this, and all they have to do to escape this is just bow down to the statue. But they know that that is wrong. Notice the answer that they give as we pick back up. In verse 16 it says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that is the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up. Man, as Nebuchadnezzar looks at them and says, who do you think this God is who is to save you? And they just look at him and say, look, we don't even need to answer that, okay? Our God can save us from this furnace. But notice what they say, but even if he doesn't, we will not bow down. And if you get nothing else from this message today, I think this is one of the greatest points of this chapter, is that we need to do what's right. Okay? Can God deliver us? God can. God sometimes delivers, sometimes he doesn't. But we are called to be faithful nonetheless. So many times we are faced with decisions in our lives and we like to count the cost. We like to look and go, well, you know what, God, I guess if God can deliver me from this, I'll go this way, but I don't know if God can deliver me. Sometimes we try to bargain with God. Hey, God, if you do this, then, you deliver me, then I will. And that's not what God's looking for in followers of him. He's looking for men like Shadrach, and Meshach, and Abednego say, hey, we have no doubt. We know we have a God who could deliver us, but that really doesn't matter, okay? Whether or not he delivers, we will not bow down, okay? We will do what's right despite the cost that happens. Now, we look through history, and again, a lot of us know the answer that for these men, there's going to be an amazing miracle that will be wrought on their behalf. But for that story, I could tell you 1,000 others of men and women who were faced with the same decision, who were brought before kings, before emperors, before Caesars, who were given the same choice, who were told, look, either you bow down or you deny your God, or you will be thrown to the lions, or you will be crucified, or you will be impaled on a pole, or you will be torn apart by a wild animal. And those men stood there and said, no, we will not bow down, we will not deny our God, and they paid the ultimate price for it. Now again, they will have their reward in eternity, but the challenge for us today is, are we willing to do the right thing regardless of the cost? And I will tell you that often there is a cost for doing what's right. Again, we come back to that, that idea, and we talk about miracles. And it was interesting this week. I heard an interview on WDAC with James Dobson talking to a man by the name of Lee Strobel. Lee Strobel just wrote a book called The Case for Miracles. And again, it's hard because we love to think about miracles, and we love to think about the times that God does intervene. But you know what? There are some times that God does not intervene. The song we sang this morning, God leads us along. Okay, sometimes he brings us through the fires and the floods. Sometimes he leads us along the dark path, but he gives us that song to get us through. Again, I would encourage you, we think about, and again, I heard so many times where it is tempting inside of our hearts to say, hey, God, but if you do this, if you do this price, if you do this miracle, you do this deliverance for me, then I will do this. But the reality is, Christ already paid the price for us, okay? He paid the ultimate price. He's already bought us. We owe him that allegiance and that to do right. And these young men, as they look down at Nebuchadnezzar, they say, look, I don't care. God can deliver us, but if not, we will not bow down. Well, the story goes on. It says that Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury, and the expression on his face changed towards Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He spoke and commanded that they heat the furnace 7 times more than it was usually heated. So this guy is mad. Okay, you can just see his face change, and he says, look, fire that thing up and make it as hot as you can get that fire going. It says that as it goes on, it says, then and he commanded certain men of valor who were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their trousers, their turbans, and their outer garments, and were cast in the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's command was urgent and the furnace exceedingly hot, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound in the midst of the burning burning fiery furnace. So the king commands them to be tied, and the fire is so hot and so intense that the guards who throw them into the furnace are killed by the flames and the heat coming from that furnace. But notice it says, then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he rose in haste, and he spoke to his counselors, did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said to the king, true, O king. Look, he answered, I see 4 men loose, walking in the flame of fire, and they are not hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Man, think about that scene as Nebuchadnezzar looks, and these men are there. Okay, you would assume these guys would just be consumed. I mean, we laugh today about just melting in the pews for the heat. I mean, honestly, that kind of heat, that's what he should be expected to see, is they basically melt and burn to nothing in that furnace. But he looks, he's like, wait a second, they're still standing in there, and they're walking around, and wait a second, didn't we put 3? Who is that 4th one? It's like his appearance is the Son of God. I think from this, one of the things I love about this is no matter where we are in our life, this is a reminder to us that through all our trials, God is with us. Okay, through the darkness, through the things that we go through, and we see that in here, and even we're not told whether Shadrach, Meshach, or Abednego can see it, but Nebuchadnezzar can see that God is with them. Well, then Nebuchadnezzar went near the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spoke, saying, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth from the midst of the fire, and the satraps and administrators, governors, and the king's counselors gathered together, and they saw these men on whose bodies the fire had no power. The hair of their head was not singed, nor were their garments affected, and the smell of fire was not on them. Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him. And they have frustrated the king's word and yielded their bodies that they should not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree that any people, nation, or language which speaks anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made an ash heap, because there is no God who can deliver like this. I love that phrase. Remember? It's the same guy who just a few verses ago said, who is that God who could deliver you from my hand? You know what? It was because of the faithfulness of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that King Nebuchadnezzar found out who that God was. And not only will King Nebuchadnezzar find out, but a decree will go through all of Babylon declaring how great the God of the Jews is. And I think for us, this is, again, maybe the final application I'd like to bring out of this is that when we take a stand, and it will not be easy, okay, there are going to be trials and consequences to following what God has, but this I am sure of, when we do, and we follow God in faith, we will see his name glorified, and we will see people come to know him. We think about the martyrs who died, who gave their lives, and you study that time period. The church did not die. Every time they would kill church leaders, every time somebody was martyred, it seemed like the church would only grow that much more. And so this morning, the challenge I want to leave with you is, what is going to be the cost for us as Cochranville Church to follow what God has for us? There are going to be times of great joy and fun. There are going to be some times of trials, and we need to ask ourselves, are we willing to pay the price that God has before us to do what is right? Well, I don't want to leave off, but I had to tell you that the story with Nebuchadnezzar is not over. And I hope you come back next week, because we're going to find out that Nebuchadnezzar is going to get another life lesson about just who this God is who has delivered Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And if you have not heard the story, you definitely will want to, because it's a great one.